I think we're live. Dajahao. Hi guys, it's Shanae and welcome back to my channel. And today we're continuing the read along for ErHa. And as luck would have it, I seem to be coming down with a cold. Because I'm perpetually ill. It's great. I hope my voice will hold for the entire 2 hours. We shall see. But yeah, we left off, for anyone who is maybe new here, we do read-alongs, mostly Danmei. Actually, exclusively Danmei at the moment, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, we're currently busy with Volume 8 of ErHa. We left off with the potential reveal that Moran is impersonating the actual Moran and is not actually Moran. And I really hope that this is a lie. But considering Moran's reaction, I think that hope might be in vain. I hope the audio's okay as well. Let me just quickly see where we're at with things. Seems like it should be okay. Okay, thank you. And hi, everyone. So, I usually read for an hour, we take a 10-minute break, and then we come back and finish off the second hour. And I hope that Meat Bun doesn't torture us too much in the process. So, I've actually kind of like been just, not seriously, but I'm currently reading just on my own case file of Julia Richards, which is just such a nice, wholesome series. And I was thinking like I actually just need to do aftercare in the form of reading that after I've finished with the current sessions of ErHa, because they are sad and depressing. But anyway, I have spoken long enough, I feel, because we started a bit later than I had hoped. I have coffee here with me as well, and I think that's more or less it. If you can hear in the background, there is a fan going because it is full summer now and I'm dying of heat. So, yay. Okay, for anyone who is following along with their own copies, we are on page 155. I feel like, am I a bit quiet? Should I pull it? Let's just pull the mic a little bit closer and hope that helps. Okay, chapter 257, Goddess of the Riverbanks. Interesting. The hall erupted into chaos, all save for Moran, who remained calm, eyes still closed. How can that be? What cold case in Xiangtan? Why would he want to kill? Wu Yanli spoke over them. It's a long story, and one that happened many years ago. Many of those who witnessed these events are no longer living, but as they say, the truth will out. Despite the difficulty, Tianjin Pavilion's investigations managed to unearth irrefutable evidence. The tension in the room rose like smoke around them, yet Mu Yanli cut through, continuing without hurry. Have the people I dispatched you to find in Xiangtan arrived? Her attendant excused himself to check outside the hall before returning with his answer. Yes, Pavilion Master. They're waiting outside. Invite the first one in. The first to enter the hall was an elderly tradesman, his back stooped with age, tremulous and quivering. At the sight of the hall filled with cultivators, he fell to his knees, kowtowing frantically at the words as the words tumbled from his mouth. Greetings, honored cultivators. Greetings, honored cultivators. Yeah, the one we don't like, which is just sad, because, like, I've had such a fond connection to the name Yanli up until this point. It's been a long, hard journey for you, sir, but there's no need to be anxious, Mu Yanli assured him. I merely have a few questions. All you need to do is answer them. The old man continued to tremble upon the floor until a monk from Wubei Temple brought over a seat and helped him onto it. Even then, the man was too terrified to seat himself fully. More than half his rear hung over the edge of the seat as he made himself as small as possible. I'll ask 2 questions to start. Where are you from? What do you do? The old man's teeth chattered as he answered in a strong accent. I'm from Shangtan, and I just sell lanterns by the roadside. The crowd eyed him curiously, from the sparse white hair on his head down to his ratty shoes. How could this lantern seller be connected to such horrific events? And how long have you been selling lanterns, sir? Most of my life. 50 or so years, it's hard to remember. Watch him say it's hard to remember and then perfectly recall the horrific events of that night. Not that both can't be true at the same time, but it's just gonna make it more frustrating for me. That's all right. What I want to ask you about happened much more recently than 50 years ago. We only raised a hand to indicate Moran. Do you recognize this man? The old man glanced at Moran and caught a glimpse of a tall, strapping young man, imposing in his magnificence. Hesitant to look in the first place, he barely glanced before tearing his eyes away. After a few moments, he snuck another look, then another, before eventually announcing, No, I don't. Not surprising, Wu Yanli said. Let me ask you this instead. When you sold your lanterns near the house of the drunken jade in Shangtan, was there a child who liked to stand by your stall and watch you work? The old man's memories of this was as sharp as his eyes were rummy. Ah, that's right, he said, nodding away. The child who came nearly every night. He loved to watch me make my lanterns, but he was too poor to buy one for himself. I remember speaking to him a few times. A quiet lad, timid. And do you remember the child's name? I think it was Moran. Oh, sorry, he says Moranar. The crowd, now hanging on the old man's every word, turned as one to stare at Moran. Lost in memory, the old man mumbled, Was there an R at the end? I don't know, but he was from the house of Drunken Jade. Renar is indeed the child of my brother and the house's madam, Shizun said, his brows drawn low. Pavilion Master Mu, are you trying to accomplish... Sorry, why am I struggling so much? What are you trying to accomplish? Now I've lost my place. What are you trying to accomplish by inviting this gentleman here to tell his tale? Madam? Startled, the old man waved his hands in negative. No, that's not it. The madam's son was also Mu, but his name was Muanyan, the little tyrant of the area. The old man lowered his head to gesture at a faded scar on his forehead. That kid was vicious. I still have the scar from where he hit me with a brick. A right little terror, that one. Shizun face paled. Mian? Oh, not Mian, sorry, Mian. My bad. Sir, are you absolutely certain? Madame Wang chimed in, anxious. The names do share a character after all. Was the name of the madam's child Moran or Nian? The old man considered the question carefully, then nodded again. It was Nian. No mistake about it. I wouldn't forget this. It was definitely Nian. Shizun had been leaning forward intently. On hearing this, he stiffened, then slumped back in his seat, dazed. Nian. Wu Yanli pressed ahead. The child who liked to watch you make your lanterns. Do you remember what he did at the house of Drunken Jade? I'm not too sure about the specifics. Maybe he helped in the kitchen? I do know he had a bad reputation. Rumor was the boy was light-fingered, especially around guests. The old man racked his brains, then his face lit up. Ah, that's right. Nothing good could come of that kid. He grew worse as he got older. I remember he raped a virgin. The girl killed herself for shame. Huh? Let me read this and then we'll talk about it. I remember that in the book where Namgong's wedding takes place, this lantern seller appeared in Moran's flashback. Yeah, the thing is, all of this has been very consistent because it's not Moran who made the mistake. He might have lied and might have known that they were making a mistake and just went with it. But technically, it's not Moran that made the mistake in identity. It's Shizun who mistook him for Wen Yan because they misread the character. And it just happened that it was similar enough that there was a problem. So his backstory, what we've learned of him, is his genuine backstory. It's just that they mistook him for a noble. And if I'm not misremembering, I think it's the kid that was so horrible to him and fed the food to the dogs. Or maybe it wasn't, but that's who I currently suspect the actual Moon Nian was. But I feel like if Moran had genuinely raped someone, I mean, we know he's raped Chuaning, but if he genuinely raped just a random girl, that would have come up by now. Moran has not shied away from all the atrocities that he has done. I don't know if I believe this. Maybe I'm being too generous with Moran. What child wouldn't want to go along with someone in the hopes of a better life? Yeah. Moran once told Chuaning a story about a cow eating grass, which might be the original version of that tale. Yeah. No, I don't necessarily blame a child Moran for the choice that he made at the time that he made it. The question is just, did he lie intentionally or unintentionally? If the reveal of the identity swap had been astonishing, it was nothing compared to the shock that resounded through the hall at the revelation that Moran had ruined an innocent young woman. A number of the cultivators in the hall, parents themselves, took it especially hard. One man growled through clenched teeth. Who knew? The upright Mozongshi is actually a beast disguised as a man. How vile. Make him pay with his life. Moran said nothing, silently watching the old tradesman. In his previous life, the bloodbath he'd made of the cultivation world had caused Tinian Pavilion to step in as well. Thank you for addressing that, because I was like, how could they not have? That feels ridiculous that they would step in now, but not in the previous life. Back then, this very same old man had been brought forward by Mu Yanli to identify him. And what had Moran done back then? He'd laughed in their faces, uncaring. He turned to Xu Zhengyong and Madame Wang, the mirth on his face twisting in a sneer. And, he said, do you hate me? Do you detest me? Will you turn on me, just like my good Shizun did? Gonna tell me I'm vile by nature beyond remedy? By then, Moran had long been studying the Jianlong chess formation. All his plotting had more or less been dragged into the open, yet Xu Zhengyong had still believed in him. Oh, that hurts. Look, I say this with the knowledge that most likely Meat Bun is gonna do exactly this to me, but if she kills Madame Wang and Xu Zhengyong in this timeline, I will not forgive her. I will continue reading. I will not forgive her. I will forever have a chip on my shoulder over their deaths if she does this. And I think she is gonna, because we cannot have anything nice. But yeah, I just want to go on the record stating that now. Only after hearing the man's tale did Xu Zhengyong jump up. So enraged, he was ready to spit blood. His tiger-like eyes bulged and teeth bared as he shouted, "Bastard! You bastard!" The word bastard drew another guffaw from Moran, deranged in his delight. He laughed so hard, the corners of his eyes began to mist with tears. Raped a virgin, Xu Zhengyong believed he'd done that. Xu Zhengyong seriously believed he'd done that. I mean, to be fair, you do end up doing that to Chuaning, even though you probably don't know that. No, I think he is fully aware. I can't remember. Moran's laughter had wrenched to a stop as he relinquished the last of his hope, his handsome face distorted like a candle melting into a warped mess of wax. "That's right. I committed every single one of those terrible crimes. I killed your nephew. I sent that pitiful girl to her death. And so what if I did? If Uncle wants to act as judge and jury, just go ahead and kill." Pain seared through his chest. Xu Zhengyong was an impulsive man. Before Moran had finished his sentence, he was already lunging forward, tears of hatred bright in his eyes, the sharp edge of his fan slicing across the skin above Moran's heart. Moran had frozen where he stood. Then the corners of his mouth lifted. He lowered his head to look at the fresh blood dripping from his chest, then sighed. "Uncle, you've raised me for so many years now, yet you doubt me." "Shut up." Moran smiled, but there was a quiver to the set of his shoulders. "Fine. Whatever. When it comes down to it, we're not related by blood after all. So the sham of a family, the Shizun peak, there's nothing left for me to be sentimental about." Blood splattered hot and crimson across his face. Numbly, Moran watched as Xu Zhengyong crumpled at his feet. He hadn't wanted to kill him, but Xu Zhengyong, rash as ever, had been the one to strike first. He'd practically asked for it. After a long moment, Moran lifted his bloody gaze to the horror-struck Madame Wang. Lips, he stepped over his uncle's body towards his arms. Xu Zhengyong reached out with the last of his strength to grip the hem of Moran's robes, refusing to let go. There seemed to be a genuine distress and heartache beneath the fury of this middle-aged man. But Moran, lost in his madness, had no idea how to interpret such an emotion in his uncle's eyes, with the tears welling up in them. Nor did he want to. "Don't." Moran heard Xu Zhengyong say, "Don't her." "She's a witness. I can't let her go." Moran's voice was calm, even amiable. "At least Shimong's not around. In exchange for all those years you spent raising me, I'll spare his life." It's so interesting that despite everything, Moran could never get himself to actually harm Shimong. I wonder if there's something to that, or if it is genuinely just him holding to some warped sense of the promises that he made to Xu Zhengyong and then later to to running as well. You know, like allowing Shimon to live because he's a bargaining chip. I would like to think that there was something keeping him from killing Shimon even until the end, but I might be too hopeful. What could Madame Wong do against Moran? She couldn't fight him. She could only weep and repeat her husband's words. Bastard. As the blade slid in and blood spilled out, as her consciousness faded, as she looked at Moran for the last time, she mumbled, "Oh, Renard, why?" In truth, Moran's hands had trembled, unsteady, as he'd stabbed her. When he pulled out the dagger and looked down, they were slippery with blood. The dagger gleamed filthy and crimson in his grasp, still warm, but the warmth soon faded to nothing, just like his home, like every single person he could call his kin. He'd lived with an undercurrent of unease all these years. Deep down, he knew Shimon, Shizun, and Madame Wong. None of them were related to him. The real nephew had long died at his own hands. Ridiculous. The shout broke Moran out of his reverie. His head shot up, but in his confusion he looked left and right before realizing it was Shizun who cried out, "I've raised this child. I know better than anyone. There's no way he'd do that to a young maiden. This is a blatant lie." Moran stared, stunned. A strange, acrid bitterness surged in his heart as he closed his eyes, lashes trembling. It was different this time. Between these two lifetimes, so much was different. The old craftsman was so startled he stumbled off his seat and began to kowtow, knocking his head against the floor. "No, I'm not lying. Shizun, please calm down. I'm not lying." He was but a pitiful craftsman, completely out of his depth. To be shouted down by a sect leader so alarmed him that his complexion went a muddy grey. He couldn't even stammer out a full sentence. "Get out!" Shizun low command held a leashed fury. When the old man didn't move at once, it was followed by a sharp "Out!" Sorry, I hope that wasn't too loud. The old tradesman finally scrambled up, but was stopped by a man from Tianyan Pavilion. Trapped, he dropped to the floor, shivering and mumbled over and over, "What the hell? Why is this happening?" "Shizhongmen," Lian Li warned, "kindly keep your temper in check. Sir, there's nothing to be afraid of. Tianyan Pavilion only seeks to right wrongdoings. We do not stoop to making false accusations or harming innocents." Helping the man up, she gestured. "Please, sir, continue." "Well, it took you frickin' long enough to right wrongs, like you had to wait until Nangong was dead and everything was falling apart before you dared to come and seek justice for anything." "Get yourself a man like this, uncle, indeed. Yes." Oh, I read that the wrong way around, but I stand by what I said. um, Please, sir, continue. "I don't know what else there is to say." The old man was well and truly frightened. He didn't dare continue reminiscing. "Shenzhen, venerable monks, I beg you all to let me go. I really have nothing else to say. My memory is terrible. It's really, really terrible." Amidst this deadlock, Moran, who'd been silent all this time, suddenly turned to Shizun and dropped into a deep kowtow. His reaction left no room in anyone's mind. Renard, Shizun, and Shimon were both speechless, unable to manage a single word. That soft, disbelieving murmur had come from Madame Wang. Back on Mount Zhao, Moran said, I said I would tell Uncle about everything once we got back. I never expected things to turn out like this. His gaze was serene. So serene it seemed almost hollow as he continued to speak into the stunned silence. Pavilion Master Mu, I assume you've gathered evidence and witnesses over the past few days. There's nothing much left for me to say, is there? Yes, that's right. I'm not the second young master of Shizun Peak. His next words drifted into the hall on the back of a soft sigh, feather light. My father is the city lord of the 9th city of Wufeng Sect, 72 cities, Nanggongyan. We have not heard that name before, have we? We probably have. I am so terrible with remembering all the names that we've been introduced to. What? Someone in the crowd blurted in shock. You wanted to hear the full story, didn't you? Moran closed his eyes before continuing. The fire at the House of Drunken Jade that year was indeed my doing. The people who lost their lives in that fire died because of me. Renard? Why? Madame Wang choked out the tears. Why would you? But that year in Shangtan, the Tofi Salo's daughter who was violated and died, he fell silent. In his previous life, nobody had been willing to hear him out. They'd rebuked him, they'd scorned him, and so he had lost any inclination to explain himself. He was such a reprehensible monster in their eyes. What was one more blood stain on his record? But in this life he finally had the chance to speak. I did not harm that girl. Loyalty Hall was silent as a tomb, all the eyes fixed on Moran as they waited for him to continue recounting those bygone events whose truths had been long lost to time. Moran raised a brow. Oh? Is there more to that case? Yes. Do go on, Moran said. I am all ears. But Moran shook his head. Before I get to the story of how the Tofu Salo's daughter met her tragic end, there's someone I must introduce first. Who? A songstress. As Moran spoke, his gaze went distant, looking past the shutters of the open windows off into the horizon beyond. In those days, there was a pair of pipa players in Shangtan. One was named Shunfeng and the other Duan Yihan. The names were familiar to quite a few in the crowd, and their eyes widened in recognition. Shunfeng and Duan Yihan? Ah, those famous pleasure house musicians. That's them. I remember. The two were musicians from Shangtan, hailed as the twin goddesses of the riverbanks. That's where the chapter title came from. After their hometown's geography. Yes, how did it go now? Fengruo's singing heralds the arrival of spring. Yihan's dancing fills the skies with flowers. Was it? One man stroked his beard with a sigh. I was in my 30s then, and those two were all anyone could talk about. They were highly sought after, and their performances were very exclusive. Supposedly, wherever they performed, the pleasure houses would be full to capacity and beyond. They were that popular. So what I'm thinking right now is that Duan Yihan was Moran's mother, because in one of the flashbacks it was mentioned that she had danced on a pole and then was lured into dancing on knives, and that's how she lost her ability to dance because of the damage that was done to her feet. Or maybe it wasn't dance, but like do the pole thing that she had done up until that point. So that's why I'm like, okay, maybe if she could do that, she used to be a very good dancer, and then as she aged, obviously people lost interest in her, and I don't know why I'm quoting, but like, you know, the typical thing of, oh, you aged out of your beauty, now I'm not interested in you anymore. So that's kind of my logic. But we'll see. Didn't those two legendary musicians duel at some point? Another voice chimed in. They did, Moran confirmed. Shin Fengruo was 2 years younger than Dun Yihan and accordingly joined the pleasure house she worked at 2 years later. Her youthful arrogance wouldn't allow her to tolerate Dun Yihan as a rival in fame, and she threw down a challenge, inviting Dun Yihan to a competition at the House of the Drunken Jade. 3 songs played, 3 songs danced, to see whose skills were superior. Who won? It was a tie, Moran said, but it was the start of a fast friendship between the two. Though Shun Fengruo and Duan Yihan worked at different pleasure houses, they frequently crossed paths and became as close as sisters. One impatient listener cut in, "What's all this got to do with anything? Why bring these women up now?" Anne flicked a glance over at the speaker, then said, Dun Yihan was my mother. Yay! Okay, sorry, small victories. We gotta settle for the smallest of victories with frickin' meat bun, cause... Okay, we have a beautiful illustration that is not terribly tragic, so let's appreciate it for a moment before we move on to the next chapter. Look at it, it's stunning. On to chapter 258, Pride Unyielding. His declaration was met with shocked silence. The mere sight of Dun Yihan stepping out with her papa in her arms cost extravagant sums of silk and coin. That celestial goddess of music was Moran's mother? My mom happened to cross paths with Nan Gongyan, the 9th city lord of Wufeng sect, in the entertainment houses. He had some skill at poetry and song, as well as a silver tongue and good looks to boot. Moran paused. My mom made the mistake of falling for him. Shimeng shook his head. How could this be? He murmured. In what world would Nan Gongyan refuse a beauty falling into his lap? But he was mindful of his rank and status, and didn't dare reveal his true identity to a songstress. He told my mom he was a businessman from Linyi who was visiting Xiangtan. After 7 books, the male lead's mother has finally made an appearance. I mean, to be fair, she's made an appearance before this, but she has been skillfully unnamed. And I say skillfully because I hadn't realized that I didn't know her name until the subject came up. And it makes sense because why would Moran think of her by her name instead of just his mom? So yeah, I think that was really well done. They were lovers after all. If they spent their days together, how did your mom not find out? Moran scoffed. If she did, many things would have been different. Nan Gongyan was a consummate liar, and he was only in Xiangtan for a short while. My mom had no time to discover the truth. While he was there, a letter came from Linyi. As soon as Nan Gongyan received this mysterious note, he left Xiangtan in a rush. Did your mom not ask where he was going? He left in the middle of the night without even saying goodbye. They'd been together for months, yet Nan Gongyan merely left a stack of silver leaves and a slip of paper with the words, "Yearn not for me," before disappearing into thin air. A female cultivates aside. Dancers and singers at these places are always hoping for true love. How pitiable. Unable to contain her curiosity, she inquired, "What then? Did his abandonment leave your mother so devastated she sent someone after him?" Moran shook his head. My mom was kind, gentle, and timid. She kept her suffering to herself even after being abandoned. But soon she found she was with child. Madame Wang gasped. Her eyes were filled with grief. She had no idea what to say to Moran. The entertainment house was willing to keep her on the condition that she get rid of the child. A mother did not dance as beautifully as a maiden, and they were not in the business of losing money. You know, her aging out of the profession, I actually would have preferred. Which is insane to think, because it's so misogynistic in and of itself, but the idea of being like, oh, you either get rid of the child or you lose your job, is somehow just worse to me. But the madam asked for a huge sum of money for her freedom. She took all the savings she had, every valuable thing she owned, down to the embroidered slippers on her feet, and brought herself the freedom to seek my dad in Linyi. How did a penniless woman travel all the way from Shangtan to Linyi? Whispered Madame Wang. Someone helped her. Who? Shun Fengruo. When Shun Jie heard my mom had left the entertainment house, she rushed out in the dead of night. She gave my mom all the coins she had and said that if she couldn't find my dad, my mom should come to the house of drunken Jade in search of her, and they'd live happily together. I know that this strong form of female friendship probably isn't gonna last long, because again, we cannot have nice things, but let me treasure it for 2 seconds. Master Xinjing sighed. Such tender sisterhood. I underestimated these women. What then? Asked Jiang Shi. Did your mom find Lang Gongyan? After a beat of silence, Moran burst into laughter. She did. Lang Gongyan had faked his name and identity, but my mom still found him with no trouble at all. Huh? Someone gasped. No way! Yep, answered Moran. Through pure coincidence. The audience members exchanged confused glances. How can that be? Someone asked. The city lords of Rufeng rarely show themselves in public. That's true. Moran's features took a darker cast. But at weddings and at the first month celebration of their children, Rufeng sect always host a banquet and accept well-wishes upon the city towers, do they not? Comprehension dawned upon the crowd. Was the letter Lang Gongyan received a command for his return home to be married? Someone else burst out. I remember now. Lang Gongyan's wife was the daughter of a rich family. Was he forced to give up the songstress he pledged himself to go home and marry the rich maiden? Apathy was written all over Moran's face. He wasn't forced to give her up, nor did he go home to be wed. The mysterious letter he received was actually a piece of good news. The leader of Rufeng sect had informed him that his wife was about to give birth, and he should hurry home and be at her side. So it's not like, no, he was already married, don't worry about it. He was cheating. Great. Shizun Yong had been listening in pale-faced silence, but at this he couldn't help blurting out. So when Lang Gongyan was having his fun in Shangtan, he was already married? I mean, King, I understand you cannot comprehend the horribleness of those lesser than you, but not everyone is as doting on their wives as they should be, unlike you. Moran lowered his lashes. Surprisingly, he didn't seem remotely upset. Lang Gongyan had been gone traveling to take his mind off of the fact his wife was pregnant, yet so sickly she stood to lose the child. Make me hate him more, why don't you? When he met my mom, he liked her, so he lied and said he was unmarried to win her over. Someone stomped a foot in fury. What a beast! Going off to have his fun with his pregnant wife at home and getting a child on another woman too. Poor Dun Yihan. Did Nangongyan even acknowledge her? Of course, the answer to this final question hardly needed to be said. After the waves of castigation, the eyes of Moran were growing more sympathetic. Moran didn't care what they thought of him. He continued his mother's sad tale. One secret, kept across 2 lifetimes. This was the first time he was speaking these words out loud, and there was a relief in telling amidst the pain. A banquet was held in Linyi to celebrate the birth of the city lord's son. When my mom arrived at the 9th city, she saw Nangongyan atop the richly decorated tower with his arm around his wife, giving his thanks to the people below and tossing out treats. My mom never sought him out. She'd spent every coin she had to get there. She couldn't even make her way back to Shantung. After a few months, she gave birth to me alone in an abandoned woodshed in Linyi. Did she take you back to the house of drunken jade? Asked Jiangxi. Moran shook his head. When I was born, I was weak. I fell terribly ill before I was even a month old. There was no way she could travel with me. She went begging at the door for every doctor in the city, but no one would help her. Eventually, she had no choice but to go to Rufeng sect with me in her arms in search of Nangongyan. Thus had the frail mother and her kitten-like newborn appeared, travel-worn and weary, before her bygone lover. That man had felt no joy upon seeing them, only endless shock and fear, that soon turned to anger. He had a wife and a son of his own, and his bride was the distinguished daughter of a powerful family. His son was a cute and chubby baby. Their family was peaceful and whole. In his eyes, Dun Yihan was like a rat dropping on his doorstep, an unwelcome sight that threatened his reputation and family. Surely this woman had come with some motive in mind. Why on earth would he acknowledge them? Oh my goodness, watching my wife carry my child is such hard work. I need a vacation. Essentially, yes. Afraid she'd make a scene, Nangongyan gave her sufficient coin and told her to get the hell out of Rufeng sect. Clutching at the last of her hopes, Dun Yihan spoke through her tears. The child doesn't yet have a name. Could you... Nangongyan's face was grey with fury. Get out. Get the hell out. This child is no son of mine. You'd better find out what's good for you and get the hell away from here. She was crudely shoved out of the door. Yet she had no time to grieve. The babe in her arms could barely whimper, and his hands and feet were freezing cold. He laid curled in her arms like a dying kitten. When she called to him, he squinted one eye open and gazed at her blankly. He wasn't mischievous at all. He was well-behaved and very quiet. Blinking back tears, she brought her child again to a healer's hall. The doctor cried out at the sight of her. How many times have I told you, we're not a charity. We don't take patients for free. If you have no money, she hastily dug out the dirty cash Nangongyan had shoved at her to pay her off, terrified the doctor, which frightened the baby in her arms. Misery shone in her eyes. She bowed and scraped before the doctor. I do have money. Doctor, I do. Please do a good deed and help my son. It's not a... How should I put it? I don't want to say it. It's not a good deed if he's getting paid for it. Like, if he's getting paid for it, then you should be treated as he would treat any of his other customers. It shouldn't be like, oh, you paying me, but I'm still doing you a favor. Look, he's still so small. The doctor wasn't cruel. His harsh manner was only because children's medicine was expensive and this woman had bothered him too many times before. Now that she could afford treatments, his attitude changed. The very least he should be doing. So began weeks of herbal concoctions. And I'm not saying that doctors should work for free, but like, I'm sensitive, okay? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So began weeks of herbal concoctions, acupuncture treatments, and an extended stay in the healer's hall. Moran was sick on and off for months before he finally began to grow stronger. Then Dunyihan hadn't much coin left. She thanked the doctor and took her leave, carrying her child in her arms. By this time, winter was coming to the knee. Fearing the babe would take ill once again, she used the last of her money to buy a small cotton jacket and a set of blankets. She had nothing left with which to return to Shanghai. But as Dunyahan sat in that abandoned woodshed and looked at the little rascal suckling his thumb and gurgling up at her, she was happy and serene. She had an easy nature, content with small joys. What should I call you? The baby gurgled again. Dunyahan started a fire, teasing him as they warmed themselves by its glow. When the child laughed, so did she. The flames flickered brightly. Though the shed was dilapidated, the fire warmed her to the core. She pinched the baby's small cheeks, playing with him until he kicked his chubby feet and laughed with joy. After some thought, she said, "Why don't I call you Renard?" Sucking on his fingers, Moran watched her with his dark eyes shining. "Don't you know what your last name? I don't know what your last name should be." Sadness stole over Dunyahan's face. "You can't be an uncle, but you can't take my surname either. Mine was chosen by a maiden at the entertainment house. It'd be strange if you took it. I'll call you Renard after the flames, okay?" Moran released his finger with a wet smack. He looked up at her calmly. "Little Renard, when spring comes, we'll go back to Shangtan." Dunyahan stroked his downy hair. "Mama knows how to play the pipa and to dance. Mishin is there, and Mishin is Mama's best friend. I'm sure she'll love you. You should be good, and quickly learn to call her aunt." Forget it. With her temper, you're better off calling her Jijie. So say Shin Jijie as soon as you see her, or you won't get any candy, okay? Holding his soft hands, Dunyihan whispered, "Renard, wait a little longer. When winter is over, when the flowers bloom, we'll go home." Okay, just give me a second. So let me just see. There are still enough pages left that I don't think it's worth it to try and get to the next chapter before the 10-minute break. So I quickly want to talk about some things that I've been thinking about as we've been reading, and then I'm going to take the 10-minute break and we'll come back for the second half. No wonder my sound is terrible. I'm realizing I never plugged in my mic. That's a fail that we'll fix during the break. My bad. No, I was like, why is everything sounding so soft? Wow. Anyway, okay, so something that I'm kind of wondering with regards to Meat Bun's themes. So obviously there is the theme that I feel is a very common occurrence in most danmeis, the idea of people judging and kind of like castigating, I would almost say, people for things before knowing the full truth, making assumptions, basing their reactions off of rumors, and then just kind of like completely condemning people for it. But something that I wonder if she's also kind of exploring is this idea of the importance of truth and living a life based around truth and being as truthful as you can with the people close to you, because Moran in his first life lived with so many lies, and those lies allowed miscommunications to occur, it allowed misunderstandings to build, and then at the time when people started judging him for things that he had and hadn't done because of all the other things that he'd kept hidden, he couldn't clarify the truths from the lies. And now you see him actually being able to clarify it, and even though it's not going to fix everything magically, it is softening people's views towards him. It is helping them have a very clear image, or at least a clearer understanding of what he is and isn't capable of, and what kind of person he is and he isn't. And I found it interesting because we now know that Shimei, for both lifetimes, has lived in a lie. And it's a lie that is slowly starting to consume him. And I just wonder if we're gonna see the condemnation of Shimei in this lifetime in the same way that we saw Moran's condemnation in his previous lifetime, because Shimei is not learning from his mistakes. He's empowered by them. He believes that he's doing the right thing, and he can't see where he went wrong. So yeah, we'll see where Meatbun goes with that, if I am onto something or if I am just grasping at straws. But I just kind of wanted to mention that before I forget it. And yeah, I think that's it for now. I will see you guys. Let's make it 10 past. I know that's a 13-minute break instead of a 10-minute break. But yeah, just to make things a little bit easier. Maybe I'll come back like a minute or two earlier. We shall see. But yeah, I'll see you guys then. Okay, I'm coming back a minute earlier so we can maybe sort out audio if there is an audio issue. That's always like the scary thing of plugging or like trying to tamper with the audio in the middle of a stream because it could go horribly wrong, and I really hope this didn't. So while we wait for the seconds to pass us by, one thing that I can't remember if I mentioned it in any of the previous streams, but I've readjusted the Discord server for my channel, so there is now a read-along channel on the server where, like, if you wanna have discussions about what is going on in the novels that we're reading at the moment, I'm creating threads for it. And like I won't be checking in on them to avoid spoilers, but they'll be there if anyone wants to. Hi! I'm sorry you missed the beginning, but hopefully you can still enjoy it on replay. But yeah, so if you kind of want to discuss things there, if you do want to talk to me about something specifically, obviously be mindful of spoilers, and then you can just tag me and I will look at the ones that I am tagged in. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I couldn't remember if I had mentioned it before. I'm realizing I don't have my pillow with me. Hold on. Okay. Okay. Did I bring my coffee back with me? I did. I know this is like the most low stakes moment in this book so far, but it still feels pretty tense. Okay, for anyone who was following along with their own novels, we are on page 173 at the start of the next scene. But that winter lasted far too long. It was a year of disasters. The lower cultivation realm was overrun by demons, and Linyi reinforced its defenses by putting severe restrictions on the movements of commoners. Jinyi Han couldn't leave the city. She sought out work at a bun stall, trying to earn enough money to live on. But nothing stayed secret forever. Someone must have whispered to Nangunyan's wife about her husband's misbehavior, and soon after, the stall Jinyi Han worked at drove her off for no reason at all. Great, love that. Afterward, Jinyi Han was given no more chances. She could find no work, no matter how little it paid, and was reduced to begging for scraps and performing on the street with her child at her side. Often she'd be singing softly at Nangunyan. Often she'd be singing softly as Nangunyan rode past, garbed in finery and followed by his entire retinue. He avoided her out of shame, though there was no real need. Although Dunyan was weak, she was proud. She merely sang her songs of Xiantang. She wouldn't spare her past lover a glance, let alone cry out to him on the street and ask why she'd been abandoned. Nan Gongyan had never understood how proud this Pippa girl really was. Look how she cries, dressed in tattered clothes, unrecognizable to her kin. So why does she stare? She sang. When someone threw a copper coin her way, she again became that beautiful goddess of music. Lowering her lashes, she bowed and murmured, "Thank you for your kindness, good sir." Months passed in this manner, then years. Ghosts and fiends continued to devastate the lower cultivation realm, while Linyi watched and did nothing. Just like in case we didn't hate the man enough, just throw that in there as well. Okay. The evil, repelling walls stayed erect for a full 5 years. Moran was now 5. One day, after arguing with his wife, Nangongyan left in a huff to wander the city and clear his head. It was a beautiful day at the West Market. He stood dispirited with his hands behind his back, looking down the streets lined with bakeries and jewelry stores. Beneath a banyan tree, 2 old men played chess. Lini had always been a land of riches, no matter how many perished in the lower cultivation realm. What did it have to do with them? Here, cheer and prosperity had reigned for centuries. Nangongyan watched the chess match with interest. He hadn't stepped out in casual clothes. Why am I misreading? Sorry, my bad. He had stepped out in casual clothes, unrecognizable to strangers. He stood there, chuckling and throwing out suggestions until the men grew annoyed and shooed him off. Miffed, Nangongyan strolled along until he found himself under the shade of a great tree. A golden bird cage hung from its branches, holding a chirping canary. Dunya Yihan's verses are all from the song Meeting by the Well, from the opera The White Rabbit, which tells of the reunion between long-lost mother and son. Oh, perhaps the sunlight was so beautiful it cleared his heart. As Nangongyan stood beneath the tree, lost in his own thoughts, he remembered the gentle girl who sung in Shangtan. Cocking his head, he teased the canary. "My dear, do you know any Shangtan melodies?" The bird trilled its song, heedless of Nangongyan's request. He sighed, humming under his breath the song Dunyihan had sung countless times as she sat beside him. A clearer voice cut through his daydreams. Someone behind him was singing. Clouds gather low as the winter storm approaches. A world of snow freezes the well. That voice was like the tinkling of jade or pearls, transporting him to another time. Nangongyan whirled around. He had avoided her for so long, yet out of nowhere, through the bustle of the city and the rushing passer-bys, he caught sight of that delicate woman, just as he had, in those dreams he never dared mention to his wife. They met once more. Dunyihan stood on the street with a frail child by her side. Eyes lowered, she sang those songs that once had been impossibly dear, hoping to garner some little sympathy from the gentleman walking past. Enough, at least, for a meal. Whether the broad road before the mountain or the narrow path through the backwoods, thousands passed by this way. People streamed past in droves. No one stopped for her. The song was beautiful, but it was also it was only a pleasant sound. She was singing of her own free will. No one wanted to pay her for it. I wonder if he feels guilt for what he has done. I don't think he ever felt truly guilty for it, because if he did, Moran would not be where he is today. I think if it was a type of guilt that he felt, it was probably the kind where he was almost feeling guilty about his own image and how this was tarnishing his image, and not truly feeling guilty for what he has done to this woman as a person. I don't know how else to explain it. It feels like a high mighty pity more than anything. Farewell is easy, but reunion is hard. I look into the empty distance alone. Shoes inlaid with jade and embroidered in gilt thread appeared in her vision. A man's voice finished the verse. Countless letters left unsent, my sorrows gather as I wait for you to read them. Dunyahan slowly lifted her eyes. She saw Nangongyan again, as handsome and refined as he had been 5 years ago. He seemed not to have aged at all. Time had left no traces of its passage on his face. In his eyes, Dunyahan saw her own reflection. That beauty from 5 years ago had grown miserably faded and worn, but Nangongyan's gaze on her was soft. He'd been married for years, stuck with a woman who'd found out what he'd done, and not daring to voice her displeasure outright, had taken to expressing it in other ways. She lost her temper at the drop of a hat, and his son was likewise spoiled and ill-behaved. Now, as he stood before Dunyahan and saw her sorry state, guilt and compassion surged in his heart. Dunyahan fell silent. She lowered her lashes. The song was over. "Mom?" Confused, Moran turned to look at her. "Mom's tired," she said. "Let's go home." Moran nodded, smiling. "Let's go back. I'll figure out how to get dinner." Hand in hand, mother and son turned to leave. Nangongyan called after her. His gaze fell upon Moran. The boy was skinny, and his clothes were tattered, but he was clever and handsome. Nangongyan realized this was his son, his own flesh and blood. He reached out to touch Moran's head. Bewildered, Moran squinted, allowing the stranger to move his hair. Nangongyan recalled then how Dunyahan had come to his door with the sickly babe in her arms, begging for help, telling him the child was not yet named. "What's your name?" Nangongyan asked. "Lunar." "What's your surname?" "I don't have one." Nangongyan turned a heartsick gaze upon Dunyahan. Something compelled him to say, "Why don't you both?" Before he could finish, he caught sight of the group of Rufang sect cultivators. He flinched as if awoken from a trance. Nangongyan met Dunyahan's gaze once more. Those eyes had once curved and sweet smiles for him were now hard, with no hint of girlish fantasy. Her gaze was cold and clear. Even in the moment he'd nearly acknowledged them, she'd taken the measure of this man a long time ago. He cleared his throat and magnanimously reached for his wallet, stuffing the bag full of gold and silver and precious baubles into Moran's hands in an attempt to hide his own churning emotions. He patted the boy's head once more. "Your mom sings beautifully. These jewels should be hers." A slender hand took the pouch from Moran. Dunyahan removed one copper coin and placed it in the bowl Moran held, then gave the hefty pouch full of treasures back to Nangongyan. She said nothing else. All she offered was a gentle bow, the same she'd make to any passerby who gave her a coin. "Thank you for the kindness," she said in a tone of perfect cordiality. "Good sir." With that, she turned to leave. She'd been the music goddess of Shangtan. Her admirers had been as numerous as stars to her luminous moon when she danced. She had not been haughty when the masses gathered for a glimpse of her, and now that her shine had faded, she was reduced to singing by the streets. She did not feel shame. But her behavior that day made Moran suspicious, and after all sorts of questioning and his own small investigations, he discovered the truth of his birth. "I'm telling you this because I don't want to lie to you," Dunyahan had said when she finally explained. But, little Renar, you must remember not to hate. Yet nor should you beg before him." She poked his little head. "Once the crisis in the lower cultivation realm passes, and Nini lets commoners through the walls, we'll go back to Shangtan." Moran was silent for a very long time. "I won't beg him for anything," he said with a nod. "I'll go to Shangtan with Mom." Dunyahan smiled. I don't know if Shunmei will ever recognize me. I'm not pretty anymore. This comment deeply upset Moran. Mom is pretty. Mom is the prettiest. A smile bloomed over Dwen Yihan's face, and that faded beauty did indeed reappear once more. What a charmer, she teased. You'll make your future wife happy for sure. Damn. Embarrassed, Moran pouted and fell silent, yet those sharp little canines reappeared in his grin as he said, When I grow up, I'll marry a wife as beautiful as a goddess, and then we'll stay with Mom forever. I don't know why, but these kinds of conversations, even though they don't really matter that much in the moment, hurt so much when you look back and you look at like how the future turned out, and it's nowhere close to what you had hoped for your child. Ooh. I mean, yeah, at least he isn't like lying about the as beautiful as a goddess, but keep dreaming. What kind of goddess would marry you? Twin chimes of laughter spilled into the shed as the firewood crackled beside mother and son. Wrapped in such perfect warmth, it was easy to imagine that every day that followed would be just as peaceful. The fire and the night conjured a beautiful illusion for the penniless pair. Neither could have imagined that Jun Yihan was already running out of time. It was in the autumn of the year I turned 5, Moran continued. The Mid-Autumn Festival had just passed. Rufeng sect had closed itself off for so long there wasn't enough food for everyone in Nini, so they put out an order to raise the prices. In truth, they meant to have the poorest among them fasting instead of fighting the rich for food. The tale thus far had already wreaked havoc on Xu Zhengyong's heart. But at these words he sunk into thought. He nodded. Yes, I remember. Rufeng sect only lowered the prices after starving citizens rose in revolt. It lasted maybe a year, 6 months or so, said Jiang Xi. Moran closed his eyes. It wasn't that long, just over a month. It was only 35 days. Emo hours are back, guys. Are we ready? And my voice is going. Seconds. I want to ask you guys, with regards to this time, I know it's not an ideal time for a lot of people who are in America and so on, but this is a much more durable time for me. And I find that I'm not as tired as I am at 9 p.m. at night, surprise, surprise. So I feel like I make a little bit less mistakes as I'm reading. So I'm kind of considering keeping this time for future read-alongs as well, and I kind of just want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on that. Okay. Page 181, chapter 259, At Your Side. I don't think it's the romantic kind. I think it's gonna be the tragic watch as my mom die kind. It's been so long. How can you remember? Someone asked. But of course he remembered. In the upper cultivation realm, in Jiang Xi's memory, it had been an ordinary 6 months. In the lower cultivation realm, in Xu Zhengyong's recollection, it had been a year of sorrow. But for Moran, it had been 35 days of sinking despair. Every morning had felt as long as a year. Every day was torment, and every night was hell. When the new prices were announced, everyone worried for themselves. No one would spare anything for Duen Yuhan and her son on the streets, so they had no choice but to dig through the trash for rotting vegetables and moldy bread. As more and more people went hungry, even the rotting vegetables grew scarcer. Under these circumstances, Moran couldn't help asking, "Mom, why don't we go to Rufang's sect and ask him for food?" But Duen Yuhan mumbled, "Anyone but him." I have mixed feelings about this, because on the one hand, I feel like when you're in that position, it's up to you to make the decisions that you make. It's kind of a thing of, you should be allowed to keep your integrity in whatever way you see fit, because there's so little else for you to hold on to. And yet at the same time, I can't help but feel like, if it's for your son's sake, is it not worth putting your pride aside? I don't know. Singing on the street side, nodding her head and bending her back, hawking her wares and smiling, all this was work she did to survive. But begging for Nangong Yan was different. No matter how dire their straits, Duen Yuhan couldn't bring herself to cross that final line. Yeah, see, that's the thing, is for a lot of people it's still very early on if they're in America. Since she wouldn't bend, Moran didn't bring it up again. The little boy was unobtrusive and extraordinarily nimble. On the 9th day after the prices were raised, he managed to steal a white radish out from the dirt. Duen Yuhan hid it very carefully. Every day they'd boil a piece the length of a fist and share it. By the 8th meal of radish, the remainder was rotting, but there was still no food to be had. Duen Yuhan cut it in half once more in hopes of stretching it for just a few days longer. On the 21st day, they finished the last of the radish. Nothing edible was left. On the 25th day, there was a great storm. Worms crawled out of the mud, and Moran caught them and boiled them in a little rainwater to eat. Their sliminess was disgusting. Moran apologized over and over to the tiny creatures, explaining that there was really nothing else. It's just making me think of the ants again. Why torture us like this, Meatbum? If he survived this, he promised, he'd honor the worms as his saviors. He prayed to the heavens, begging not to have to eat his saviors anymore, begging for this nightmare to pass. On the 28th day, Moran fell sick with fever. No child, no matter how quick or clever, or how strong their spiritual energy, could endure such privation. Duen Yuhan had no more strength left, her eyes two hollow pits. That day, as Moran slept, she made up her mind. She rose and left the woodshed that was their home, turning her steps towards Rufang's lofty towers. She had her line in the sand. She'd rather die than beg Nangong Yan for food. But her child had done nothing wrong. He was so little. How could she bear to let him die with her? Yeah. Compassion shone on the faces of the listening crowd. Regardless of whether Moran had sinned or not, these events of the past were all too tragic. Someone carefully asked, their voices sighed, "Did she manage to get any food?" "No," said Moran. "Unfortunately, Nangong Yan was in the middle of a fight with his wife when she got there." Right. He paused. "The madam had a fit the instant she saw my mother. Never mind showing her charity, she ordered her beaten and chased out of Rufang's sect." "What about Nangong Yan?" "I don't know," said Moran. "My mom never said. I mean, he has never had a spine in his life, I doubt he would start having one in that moment. He might have tried to stop them, or he might have stood there, helpless. Moran would never know what happened that day, except that his mom returned covered in injuries. She lay curled up in the wooden shed, holding him in silence. Later, she began coughing, spitting out bloody foam, and filling the room with the sour stench of copper and bile. Did I misremember Moran's backstory about the, knives? Because I'm trying to think, when would that have happened? Because it hasn't happened yet. Is that from a different Danmei? That might be from a different Danmei. I might be mixing moms. I don't know. By the 34th day, Jinyi-han was close to death. She could barely speak, and she'd stopped crying. On that day, she woke from her stupor, having regained some measure of strength, and saw Moran curled into her side, trying to use his body, all skin and bones, to keep her warm. Ever so softly she whispered, "Little Renard, if you can, go back to Xiangtan." Mom. Go to Xiangtan and find Shinjijie. Repay her. Jinyi-han patted Moran's hair. Go back to Xiangtan and repair. Don't stay in Linyi for revenge. Listen to Mom. Be good. I owe your Shinjijie a lot of money. I can't pay it back. Go to her and stay with her, help her with her work, and be sure to make her smile. When someone does you a kindness, you must remember it. Holding back his tears, Moran looked up into her emaciated face. Jinyi-han's eyes were so dark they seemed to gleam faintly purple. And pay them back. Such was the path Jinyi-han laid out for Moran before she died. She feared her child would take a dark road after her death. So she gave him 1,000 reminders to do otherwise. She exhorted him over and over again to leave this place of tragedy. Someone with a firm purpose in mind wouldn't overthink. They wouldn't fall into the prison of hatred so easily. So she gave him a purpose. Go and repay her kindness. Do not seek revenge. On the 31st day, that absurd price order was finally abolished in the wake of revolt. It had only lasted a month and 5 days. To the wealthy, it was as if a farce had ended. Smoke was rising from the ruins of Ligny, but they in their silken canopies only stretched lazily as day broke over the city, taking the fragrant dew offered by their handmaidens and rinsing their mouths. At news of the price order being abolished, they groused a bit, then yawned. None of it mattered overmuch, but to Moran, this was the best news of his life. Why is this giving me, COVID vibes? Now that they didn't have to worry about filling their own stomachs, kind people reappeared on the streets. Moran was given a pancake and a battered bowl of pathetically thin gruel flavored with shreds of meat. He couldn't bear to take even a sip of it for himself. Cradling it with utmost care, he rushed back home to his sick mother. Meat porridge is amazing. Surely Mom will get better as soon as she has some. He rushed to save his mom's life with that porridge, but he couldn't run. The bowl had a crack in its side. Wouldn't it be a shame if any spilled as he ran? He burst into the woodshed with mingled delight and impatience. Mom! Holding the broken bowl in his hands, he nudged open the shoddy door with his head like a particularly grubby dog. A smile spread over his face. His features creased with anticipation for the future. It was such a good day. They had meat porridge. His mom would get better. Spring was finally here, and they'd go back to Shangtan together. It would be peaceful there. They wouldn't go hungry, and there was someone named Shinjijie. They'd finally stop wandering and begging for food. What a wonderful thing it would be to go home together. The door creaked open. Sorry, I'm just trying to mentally prepare myself for this. She was lying there, said Moran, voice steady. Some of the onlookers were shocked at his calmness, others disturbed by his callousness. This man was serene even while describing his own mother's death. There was no warmth, emotion, nor even a glint of tears. No one gave any thought to how many years of haunting nightmares and agonized sorrow it took to smooth those scars into a peaceful mask. I need to read that sentence again because I kind of butchered it, but also it's beautiful, so it deserves a reread. No one gave any thought to how many years of haunted nightmares and agonized sorrow it took to smooth those scars into a peaceful mask. I called for her, but she didn't wake. She never would. She never had any of the porridge. Silence settled over the hall. Then, afterward, it was Madame Wang, her voice quavering. You returned to Shangtan alone? Moran shook his head. I went to Rufeng Sect. Someone exclaimed, Did you get revenge? My mom told me to repay kindness, not to take revenge. Moran's was still unnervingly calm. I didn't go for revenge. I just wanted to bury my mom properly. But I had no money, nor any time to raise it. I went to his manor to beg for some coin for a coffin. Did he give you any? Moran almost smiled. No. No? But you said Nangongyan still felt something for your mom. Couldn't he at least spare something for the funeral? And this is why I say he never felt truly guilty. When I arrived, his wife had died by his own hand not long ago. What? And that was me, but the book also says what? Jianxi narrowed his eyes. Nangongyan's wife did die young, and it was suicide. When that woman was pregnant, her husband was out getting bastards on other women. I don't like the way that's phrased, but after she had their son, she and her husband fought constantly. Her life was a deeply unhappy one. When she caught my mom begging for food at the manor, she was furious. I heard she stabbed Nangongyan with a knife, and he threatened to divorce her. Moran paused. She couldn't bear it. In the dead of night, she hung herself. Actually, she died just a few days before my mom did. Okay, I see the logic there. Hi. Poor child. No one deserves that, especially him. Yeah. No one knew what to say. A desolate young master's careless dalliance had left one woman in ruins and his own family destroyed. Perhaps it was karmic retribution. Is it though? Like the only people who suffered wasn't him. He suffered as a consequence, but it wasn't. He suffered because he caused other people to suffer first, you know? I showed up just as the sect leader was berating Nangongyan. His wife's family was there too. all-powerful merchants in Linyi. They'd already given Nangongyang the sharp end of their tongue up and down, and all he felt was resentment. Of course he wasn't happy to see me. Madame Wang had the softest heart of all in the room. Though she knew Moran wasn't kin, she still wept and murmured, "Bernard." These were not memories he wished to relive. The sight of Nangongyang's face, the faces of all those there to pay their respects to Madame Nangong's memorial hall. That woman had everything. Gilt paper, silver flowers, paper dolls and piles of spiritual tools, brocade soul flags, and a gleaming casket of gold wood. Hundreds wept, kneeling in vigil for a woman who'd taken her own life. The ever-bright lamps were filled with scented whale oil, and those 99 coils of incense burned in silence, scattered fragrant ash at the soft touch of the breeze. It was a busy scene of mourning. But what of his own mother? Dunyi Han, the music goddess of Shantung, only had rags unfit to wear, and a son who was skin and bones. She lacked even a straw mat to wrap her body in. Beggars can't be choosers. These were the words Nangongyang hurled at Moran in his fury and his despair. The irony of that. Before the watching eyes of his sect leader and in-laws, he shoved his bastard son out the door and out of his life. Of course, Madame Nangong's funeral had a lacquered coffin, agates and fragrance pearls. There was frost cloth to preserve her body, silk to hide her face, and brocade to cover her eyes as she embarked on her final journey. Dunyi Han's death was marked by just one corpse and one mourner. It was an eternal farewell and nothing more. According to Nangongyang, she didn't even deserve a casket of cheap board. Dare to say all were equal in the face of death. They were unequal from the very beginning. In the end, one was borne up like pristine jade, while the other sank into putrid mud. I dragged her to the burial mounds and buried her there. Moran kept this part of the story brief, his voice carefully level. He didn't mention how he'd begged passerbys to help him, or how he'd spent 2 weeks carrying the rotting corpse to the city outskirts. Nor did he describe how he dug through gravel and stone with his bare hands to cover his mother's wasted form. Moran wasn't used to giving voice to his suffering. He'd always been someone who buried his past deep inside. He never brought it up of his own will. In the first decade and more of his life, he'd experienced all there was of humiliation, malice, scorn, and slander. His heart was hard as iron. He cared nothing for what others thought of him, and wanted their compassion not at all. And then I went to Shantung. After burying his mother, he couldn't bear to remain in Linyi. He hid in a basket stowed in the back of a Taoist's cart and snuck out of the city, planning to do as his mother bade him and go to Shantung. It took him 6 months, from high summer to the beginning of winter. When his shoes fell apart, he went barefoot. Thick calluses covered the soles of his feet. He walked on, asking and asking for directions. Just outside Wubei Temple, hunger and cold finally defeated him. He collapsed into a heap of dried grass. Mom, the little boy lay curled on the ground, eyes dull beneath scraggy hair. He looked up at the sky. It was snowing, the first snow of winter. I'm coming to see you. I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. Ooh. Snowflakes fell. whisper light covering his eyes. There came the sound of rustling footsteps, followed by a pair of hands reaching into the grass. He heard a boy's voice ringing out, "Shizun, come take a look. What's wrong with him?" Chuaning being his original savior is something I'm still trying to internalize and come to terms with. That sounds very dramatic, but it just, it's a tried and true trope, but sometimes it just hits so much more effectively than others, and this is definitely one of those times where it hits. Overall I feel like Dominic does it very well. Okay. After a moment, the rustle of straw sandals grew closer. A man said, "Don't worry, let me take a look at him. You go back first." His deeper voice was calm and indifferent. Instinct made Moran afraid. He liked the youth better. The man seemed cold as ice. The irony considering how he views Chuaning in the first half of the series. Sorry. He should have had the strength to do it, but his desire to live drove him. Sorry, he shouldn't have had the strength to do it, but his desire to live drove him to lift his hand and grab weakly at the young man's hem. Tears streamed down his little face before he could form the word food. "I'm so hungry. Please, I want some food." The youth was precisely the young Chuaning who'd come down from the mountain with Huaizhe. Chuaning froze. "What?" Moran struggled to lift his filthy face, hands shaking as he mimed eating. Bitterness stung his throat, and darkness blotted his sight. His ears were ringing. Weeping, he begged the youth in front of him for mercy. If the Shalgoga abandoned him like so many lords and young masters had before, he'd die. He would die for sure. He finally fell apart. Hungry. Chuaning fed him a flask of congee, and that congee saved a starving boy. Moran left Wu-Bei Temple nearly delirious. All he remembered of his savior Gogo was that he had sharp phoenix eyes, swept up at the ends, and that his lashes were very long and thick. Nothing else. But every day on the trek from Wu-Bei Temple to Shangtan, he wore the cloak his savior Gogo had given him. He had been very small back then. A young man's cloak on his tiny body was conspicuously oversized. When he pulled up the hood, it more or less covered his whole face. Along the road, well-fed children snuggled against their parents would see him and laugh. "Mom, Dad, look at the little beggar boy. What the heck is he wearing? Ha ha ha." But Moran wasn't angry. What was a stranger's mockery to him? He was merely thankful this ill-fitting cloak would shield him from the wind and rain, that it could give him some small share of warmth. Snowflakes wouldn't land on him when it snowed, and in the dark the shadows wouldn't touch his heart. Why does that feel so symbolic? Like, damn. And in the dark, shadows wouldn't touch his heart. That's literally what Chuaning did for him in the past life. Like, I'm not talking about in general, I mean Chuaning freeing his heart of the shadows that had been driving all his actions up until Chuaning's death. I hate meat bun. Okay. Every day at nightfall, he lit a fire and sat beside it, his arms tight around his knees. He put up his hood, tucked his entire body within the cloak, and stared into the orange flames from beneath its fur trim. The cloak was warm like his mom's embrace, or his savior Gogo's gentle phoenix eyes. The little boy fell asleep like this, and in his dreams he breathed in the light fragrance that lingered on the cloak, and felt as if he were leaning against the trunk of a high-tongue tree in full bloom. It always comes back to the high-tongue tree, even their first meeting, when Chuaning is known as Chuaning. Okay, let's see. 5 minutes left. We have a fabulous illustration. My word. Like, tragic, but so beautiful. In sight, of course he found Chuaning's scent delicious. Of course he'd always slept peacefully if he smelled it on his pillows. Of course he'd found those lowered phoenix eyes gentle when he first saw the Yuan elder beneath the heaven-piercing tower. No wonder he felt as if he'd seen them before. Perhaps everything was predestined. He and Chuaning had spoken long ago, had touched long ago. He'd even licked Chuaning's palm. It turned out he'd smelled the floral scent of Chuaning's clothes long ago. It turned out that the savior Gogo he'd always sought was right by his side, never leaving in life or in death. Moran looked down at the floor. In that freezing royalty hall, he felt a small crow of warmth. But that was a secret between the two of them. Moran allowed himself to dwell on it for a moment, lingering on its bittersweet ache. Then he hid that secret in his heart. He wouldn't tell another soul, let alone the staring crowd. He took a breath. Once I arrived in Xiangtan, I fulfilled my mom's dying wish and sought out Shunfengruo. 5-year-old Renar had stood there, wrapped in the thick cloak that once belonged to Chuaning, its filthy hem dragged on the ground. The little boy's dark hair looked like a bird's nest poking out from beneath the fur trim, his thin and sallow face upturned. "May I ask," he said quietly, "is Shunfengruo Jijie here?" Shunfengruo? The girl he'd asked burst out laughing. "Our star? We apply our talents here, not our bodies. But which of Miss Shin's admirers are here for her singing and not her face? Shao Didi, how old are you? How do you know her name?" Moran blinked, expression earnest. He hadn't understood a word of her chatter, but it was obvious she was making fun of him. Embarrassed, Moran clutched the edge of his cloak and flushed. "Please, I want to find Shinjijie. My mom told me to." "Huh? Who's your mom?" "Her surname's Duen Yihan." "Ah!" The girl paled, taking a step back and covering her mouth with a handkerchief. Those languid peach blossom eyes had rounded and shocked. "You're the goddess's son?" Even at the height of Dunyahan's fame, she'd never put on airs and always shared extra coin and jewelry with aging sisters whose looks and voices had faded. The second the girl heard this little boy was Miss Duan's son, her attitude changed completely. She hustled him into the inner room to see Shunfengruo. Small mercies, guys. Small mercies. The instant the door closed behind his guide, Moran knelt before Shunfengruo and told her everything. Shunfengruo's tears soaked her silks. She summoned the madam at once and said she'd keep Moran by her side. The madam was loath to do it, but she couldn't refuse her star performer's repeated entreaties. After looking Moran up and down and deciding he was strong enough to work, she agreed with great reluctance. But a beggar moving in was thought to be bad luck. He was required to burn all his clothes and scrub every inch of his skin. Bath was no problem, but Moran burst into tears when she said they'd burn his clothes. What are you crying for? It's not like we won't buy you new ones. The madam smacked him on the head with her pipe. Smarten up. I'm giving you a room and board. Anyone else would be celebrating. But look at you whining instead. Yeah, but you're about to burn the cloak that his savior Gogo gave him, and the clothes that might hold sentimentality in terms of being the last things remaining of his mom or something like that. Moran didn't want to make any trouble for Shinjijie. She'd already done all she could. He bit his lip and willed himself to silence, rubbing his scarlet eyes and standing beside the fire as his shoulders shook with soundless sobs. Back then, he didn't understand why things had to be this way. He'd only wanted to keep his cloak, but because he was weak, because he was lowly, because he was a filthy beggar, because he didn't want to bring bad luck or cause trouble, he had to let them yank it off his shoulders. Ouch. Let's just see. Why couldn't he fight back? Why couldn't he say no? Why did he not even have the right to cry? The cloak had been his source of warmth and safety. It had been his shelter in so many storms. It was so dirty no one could tell what its original color had been. Now that he had somewhere to stay, he might not need it anymore. But even if he wouldn't wear it again, he wanted to wash it clean and fold it neatly. He would be satisfied with simply storing it at the bottom of a chest. It was his friend, not some old rag. Not me getting emotional over the freaking cloak. But he wasn't given a choice. That filthy cloak met the flames with a crackle. The servant doing the burning didn't care. He only thought the cloak dirty. But to Moran it was a cremation, a burial. He watched unblinking as the flames licked into the air and blurred the edges of the world with their heat. Slow down, there's more. Where did you come from? The young man's gentle voice seemed to echo in his ears. One of the pitiful few times someone ever showed him kindness in his lowly life. Now it was Ash. Moran took the madam of the house of Drunken Jade for his adopted mother and received her surname. More. That's where it came from. Okay, I was curious when we'd find out. From then on, he worked in the house and finally enjoyed some peaceful days. But the peace didn't last. Shinfeng Ruo was no longer young, and although the entertainment house wasn't built as a brothel, women above a certain age were still required to earn enough to pay a dignity fee. If they came up short, their first night might be auctioned off by the madam. Great, we love that. Okay, I am gonna stop here because we already are 2 minutes over the hour, and we are not close enough to the end of the chapter for me to motor through. And I'm feeling very emotional right now. So it's not very neat for me to stop here, but we're at the top of page 194. Let me just put that there. Okay. So the sad days are back. I feel like I've been able to keep it together throughout this live, not because I'm good at keeping it together, but because we kind of have had a bit more factual moments up until this point, but now the sadness is really hitting again. So I'm curious to see how much pain we're in for in the next section, but I hope you guys enjoyed today, and we'll be back next week. I'm pretty sure next week I'm still gonna be here for it. The 30th. Yes, next week we're still here for the next section. and then I will put up a poll so you guys can let me know if you'd prefer me to pre-record or to put off the lives until I'm back from holiday. But yeah, again, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you in next week's live. 再见。